What's up, Airsofters? You guys loved the Mark 18 build-off, so we thought we'd do another one, this time with the Noveske series. We're each going to pick one of our favorite brand new Noveske releases. George, what are you going to go with?
AEG.
Nice. Tanya?
AG.
I think I'm going to break the mold here and go with a gas blowback. Let's get right into it.
For my Noveske, there was a paint scheme that I've always wanted to try for a while now, and that is a single tiger stripe scheme with a single color. The trick to doing a paint scheme like this is masking it in an organic looking way. I started by tearing painter's tape down the middle to get a single rough side and would use that as the borders for both sides of the pattern. From there, I added a little piece to provide little branches that will break up the pattern and make it kind of look more tiger stripe-like. These little touches will hopefully give the tiger stripe a really cool look. This does take a while, but one thing I've learned with painting is be patient, don't rush, take your time, and it'll always come out better. Since the base AEG is like a semi-gloss green, I wanted to use a dark matte type paint that would hopefully give it a kind of like glossy sheen reflection. For this, I use a dark green color camo from Rust-Oleum. It's cheap, easy to find, and easy to work with. After I let it dry and cure, peeling back the mask you should do very slowly. It is one of the most rewarding feelings you have when you finally see your vision coming that you had in your head kind of coming to life. And so make sure you go slow on this so you don't peel off any unnecessary paint. But as you can see here, as I'm peeling this off, it's starting to give a really cool and unique look. Overall, I love how this came out, and I cannot wait to assemble this build. The gearbox for this build was brought over from an old gun that is already tuned up and upgraded. It is very similar to EPS quality and built with a stock CMQBS gearbox. I painted the outer barrel as well to not have a contrasting silver look inside the rail, and I also wanted to avoid using as many black colors as possible. Since the Magpul green is a darker, close match to the Rust-Oleum green I used, I wanted to replace the trigger guard with an OD Magpul one. Now it's time to reinsert my gearbox from my older Cena build. When you install these gearboxes with the bolt release, be aware that you need to compress the spring when inserting to make sure the bolt release fits into the correct little knob inside and enable it to function properly. Now it's time to add back the rest of the stock accessories as well install the QBS spring system. Like I said before, I wanted to avoid showing as many black parts as possible. I chose the new OD color PTS motor grip that matches the Magpul accessories that I've added. Don't forget, in reinstalling the motor, if you don't have a magnetized screwdriver, you can always use the motor to help hold the screws while you drive them into place. When torquing down the barrel with like any type of rail nut, I always suggest using a vise wherever possible. Tighten down the barrel with a bed block or a receiver block, and just go gentle. You don't have to torque it down like a real barrel. I also decided to use some 4UAD blue Loctite on my flash hider as I plan to have it, inset into the rail, and I wanted to be able to use it with a tracer unit. So being able to unscrew it without removing it from the barrel was a crucial need I needed. Aligning this KX3 was a bit of a pain, but I was able to do it. I really wanted to use a QD sling with this build, and Noveske makes a really cool adapter for their rails, so I bought a real Noveske QD mount. in black to add to this build. I might paint it in the future, but what do you guys think? Sadly, the stock screws didn't work, so I had to go find some that would work with this adapter and the rail. Look at that, perfectly aligned. Now it's time to add my AFG from Magpul in OD color. Overall, this build came out really well, and I'm very happy with the paint job, and I cannot wait to use this. So here it is, finally built, finally done. My favorite part about this build, obviously, was the paint job. I didn't know when I was creating the masking, deciding to paint, how it was gonna look. I really do like how the paint is flat, so it's kind of blending with the semi-gloss of the original color, of the original Bazooka Green, and just kind of making it like this cool little bit of contrast. Love that. Love how it looks. Very, I mean, it's kind of like Rhodesian, you want to call it, or if you want to call it, tiger stripe, it kind of is, kind of isn't, you know, so that really kind of came together. And obviously I really do like how finally I was able to add some of the OD furniture to kind of give it a lot more pops of green than pops of black. I mean, there are still a few pops of black on this, which is okay. You know, it's not, in a perfect world, I would have loved it if maybe I had all these parts maybe more green, and I might do that down the line. But for right now, really do love how it just came together. One of my favorite parts that I did with this build is, since the tracer unit is kind of built inside, is I Loctited the base, so that way I can easily just remove the cap, and I can remove the piece inside of it and charge it, so that way it kind of always stays on the gun and doesn't become an issue. So really happy about that, and it's going to be a good feature to make it so I can use the tracer unit easily. Overall, I mean, we've only done 2 gun builds, and we've done the gear build. I'd say this is probably one of my favorite things I've done yet. I'm very pumped to play with this gun a lot. You know, it's pretty lightweight, which is kind of cool. I haven't added any lights or anything. I do have a, you know, a CQBL laser I can add onto it if I want to do anything at night or in low light. But for right now, I'm just gonna kind of keep it stock like this. Overall, I'm gonna be playing with this probably a lot, and we'll see how well the paint holds up. The nice thing is even if pieces chip off, I think it's just gonna make it look even better. I cannot wait to use this gun on the field.
Starting off my Noveske build, I've got everything laid out on the table that I think I want to add. As I go through the process of upgrading and changing things, I actually realized that some of these things aren't even necessary because the CGS series is kind of already upgraded out of the box. And to get myself in the mood, I've worn my Noveske t-shirt. Isn't that fancy? So I've got my tools laid out here, things that I think I'm going to need, and I'm going to start with disassembling the upper and lower receiver by pressing out the body pins. I'm going to be doing some upgrades to the front end with a mock suppressor and tracer combo that's going to go up here. So I'm going to prep these by kind of putting them together and getting an idea of where they're going to fall with the handguard and where the tracer unit's going to fall based on the inner barrel that I want to add later. These suppressors can have the tracer unit either closer to the threading, where they're closer to the inner barrel, or closer to the front. And because I'm adding an inner barrel that is quite a bit longer than the factory one, I'm putting it in the front. So we're going to start off by removing the handguard itself by removing the screws that fasten the handguard in place. Thankfully, I don't need to remove the Noveske KX3 before removing the handguard because it's a smaller diameter than the handguard itself. I'm going to remove the gas block now by backing out the set screw and the retaining pin. Removing the barrel nut is pretty easy as long as you have a barrel nut wrench. I'm going to rotate it out of the way. Thankfully, I didn't need a vise to remove this. We're also going to get a look at the barrel shims here. On this Noveske out of the box, in order to keep the barrel locked in place and keep it from moving and to set the barrel nut in the right place, there are 7 barrel shims. I need to remember how many there are so that when I'm doing reassembly, I can space the barrel nut properly away from the upper receiver and lock the handguard in the correct orientation. Removing the outer barrel, we get a look at the hop-up assembly of these MWS-based CGS gas blowback rifles. I'm going to pull the hop-up unit out of the collar and outer barrel assembly. As you can see, the included outer barrel is not really very long, so I want to upgrade that by putting a little bit more barrel length in there and also doing an upgrade to the bucking itself. But in terms of adjustment and the hop-up unit itself, no upgrade is needed. So I'm going to remove the 2 O-rings that kind of keep the hop-up unit closed by using a dental pick here, sliding those off to the front, which will allow me to separate the hop-up unit into its 2 halves. Here we'll get a look at the hop-up arm as well as the bucking itself. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be swapping this for a slightly longer outer barrel. This is a maple leaf, and I'm going to throw a quad quantum hop-up bucking. Meant for gas blowback rifles. I'm not gonna use the nub itself. I'm just gonna use the included one that came with the CGS. When you're reinstalling or installing your hop-up bucking, you want to make sure that this spine here, this alignment spine, needs to line up in the groove on the outer barrel, making sure that your hop-up, the pressure point is aligned properly with the slot cut in the outer barrel itself. Just go ahead and press that all the way down until it locks in place in the groove. And then we're checking to make sure that the hop-up arm is applying pressure in the correct place, and we can reassemble the hop-up unit itself. Once I've got the 2 halves back together, I can reinstall those O-rings on the new outer barrel, and using that same dental pick, kind of stretch them up over into the grooves that hold the hop-up unit together. One thing I like to do when I'm installing kind of upgrades or changes or aftermarket parts is kind of test fit and pre-fit everything as I go along, so that any problems that come up or any challenges that I face, I can address kind of as I'm doing things. What I'm doing here is making sure that I'm inserting the hop-up unit first under the keeper that is in the upper receiver, and then sliding in that locking adapting collar and the outer barrel, making sure that everything seats properly. I'm reinstalling the 7 barrel shims as a starting point for my barrel nut. I'm going to finger tight that before I lock that down with my barrel nut wrench. Once I've done that and verified everything fits, I'm going to test to make sure that my gas block reinstalls properly. Knowing that that is the case, I can reinstall the pin and the set screw. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the handguard now that I've got the outer barrel and inner barrel assembly done. My adapter is in place. Screwing back in the handguard is going to complete this portion of my external, upgrades, if you will, or customizations forward of the upper receiver. I was going to change out the included grip with like a Magpul grip, but really this is pretty much a Magpul grip just with a really cool Noveske logo. I am going to switch out the trigger guard itself, and I'm swapping the select fire switch to an ambidextrous one. I'm going to remove this screw, and then kind of half rotating the selector, I'm going to press it from the right-hand side out the left side. Just to get just an idea of making sure that everything's working here, I'm going to remove the body pin from the trigger group itself. That should allow me to lift the trigger group out once I remove the magazine release. By pressing that with another pin punch, I can spin the magazine release out the other side like so. And here you'll get a look at the SP Systems trigger box, which is adjustable. Now, you don't need to do what I'm doing here, and that's replacing kind of the detent and spring for the ambidextrous magazine or the ambidextrous fire selector. I'm just doing it because it was included in the package, and if there's a moderate difference in spring pressure, I'll just go with the one that came included with my ambidextrous select fire switch. Now I can reinstall the trigger box itself. I've got one side of my ambidextrous selector in, and now that I've got it pressed over, I can test the functionality of it once I've got the right-hand side installed.
making sure that everything functions properly and that the select fire switch rotates properly in place. Now we're going to swap the magazine release. Now the magazine release that I'm using here is technically a real steel magazine release, and we're going to see that there's an issue with that once I try to reinstall everything. Now, as you can see, that this side has a lip because I'm upgrading to this Magpul enhanced magazine release. That lip needs to face outward from the receiver when you're doing your reinstallation. I'm going to test everything here once again by threading it, into the magazine release on the other side, using the pin punch to help me, spin that magazine release around to get the right tension on it. And when I go to reinstall this Magpul enhanced magazine release, you're going to see where I'm having a problem. See how the magazine is not seating? That's because the magazine release itself is sitting too far into the magazine well. So I need to actually modify something here to make that work. I'm going to start by trying to back the magazine release out one turn at a time to see if I can start to get better insertion of that magazine. And this is, part of upgrading and customizing things, is on occasion you will need to modify things or come up with custom solutions. So now what I've done here is taken a washer and cut down the sides with a file, and then I can fit that inside of this magazine release kind of channel that will ride free of movement. It will ride between the magazine release and the receiver, spacing the magazine release out and allowing me more space to get the magazine to fit. Now I'm testing to see if with that spacer I get good lockup with the magazine, and I do. So that tells me that I've got just enough space to get everything to work properly. And from there, I'm just going to reinstall everything I had already tried to install earlier. That includes the magazine release bar, the spring, and the magazine release button itself, showing you right here using that pin punch to press everything nice and tight so I can spin that magazine release lever. And you can see that the magazine release functions properly now. And it's going to net me that enhanced magazine release button that I wanted from Magpul. So I can reinstall that now as well.
Like so.
Once again, doing a functions check of everything so that we can move on to this really cool Strike Industries trigger guard. So I'm going to press out the pins on the included Noveske one. Now, it's worth mentioning that I think the Noveske one that was included looks really cool and it's absolutely fine, but I just kind of liked the idea of lending some more, personal flavor to this build. And so I wanted to swap out to this Strike Industries one. I really like the enhanced nature of it. It gives you kind of a guide rail, if you will, to insert your magazine as it sticks below the receiver a little bit. And again, really easy to install once you've pressed the pins out. Reinstallation of the new trigger guard is really easy. Putting everything back together, I'm going to use my nylon-faced hammer again to reinstall my body pins, connecting the upper and lower receiver like so. Giving myself a look at basically how it's going to look when it's finished. Doing a functions check, making sure everything still works properly, and now I'm going to swap out my stock. I wanted to go with a B5 system stock. I like the slimmer profile of it, and thankfully, because I don't have to worry about holding a battery or anything, I can go with a real stock and not have to worry about how easy it is to gain access to a battery compartment. I like the B5 Systems ones. They're very comfortable, they're very slim, they have that classic look, and I think it pairs well with the Noveske as well. Finally, we're going to move on to, furniture, which I think is probably the easiest part of the upgrades. They just screw right on, starting with this Edgar Sherman design hand stop. Next, I'm trying to figure out how I can mount my flashlight, and I want to put it on this pivoting arm that's going to get it as close as possible to my mock suppressor and as close as possible to my rail so that it doesn't interfere with my gear. And ultimately, I decide it might work best mounted to the front on the top of the rail behind the front sight post that I've moved backwards, or the backup iron that I've moved backwards. A little bit different in terms of how you might normally mount it, but for me, that was a really convenient way of being able to use the thumb depression instead of a pressure switch on this build, as I wanted to go away from a pressure switch because I do that kind of on all my other builds, and I wanted to try something different. And then finally screwing on that EMG arms optic, which I really, really like. These are made by Sun Optics. They have great glass. They work really well. Now, I know I said that I wasn't going to paint anything. After our last build, I thought I was going to be done with painting, but I can't leave well enough alone. I had to do something a little bit more custom. And I happen to have one of these paint pens at my desk, and I thought, oh, maybe I can just fill the Noveske logos with some paint. Instead of painting the whole rifle, I can still do something custom, still do something that, is me, but without having to paint the whole gun. So I'm trying, this is a total experiment. I've never done this before. So I'm trying the paint pen and then using some alcohol on a rag to try to wipe away the paint above the receiver. And it worked pretty well. Realistically, there's some paint residue left on the receiver that's over, above the logo on the receiver, but whatever. It's going to get scratched up and dirty as we play with it anyway. So here I am, again, filling more logos, this time the Noveske lettering. I'm trying to be reserved here. Like, I don't want to fill every logo on the GBBR with paint. I just want to do some tasteful ones. I really like the Noveske cross, and so I'm just kind of filling that in wherever I see one, without having to fill every logo and look like, I went ham sandwich with the paint pen. And then finally, I figured, well, I left this Noveske grip on the bottom with the Noveske logo. Why don't we fill that too, just in case somebody catches a glimpse of the bottom of my pistol grip? I don't know. But ultimately, I think that came out really well too. Yeah, you could probably find a better way to do this than with a paint pen that's rubbing off the surface. But ultimately, it came out with I ended up with a really cool kind of color scheme that was more subtle, and a rifle that I'm really happy with. So that's my build. So this is my completed Noveske build. Now, obviously, I elected to go with a gas blowback while the others went with AEGs, mostly because I had never built a gas blowback before, and I went into this thinking, hey, this will be great. I'll be able to throw in a bunch of gas blowback parts. It's going to be amazing. But the reality was, as I was building it, I discovered that these CGS-based Noveskes really don't need upgrade parts, aside from like the inner barrel and hop-up bucking I put in. All of the other parts I had gotten, the bolt, the different springs, all that stuff was completely unnecessary, which freed up a lot more time to really consider what kind of external upgrades I wanted to do to make it look cooler and perform better for, kind of what I wanted it to do. And ultimately, I think, originally deciding that I wasn't going to paint it, I was really happy with how it came out. But ultimately, I couldn't leave well enough alone, and I had to go back and paint something, because I like painting things. So I did the kind of the orange fill-in of the Noveske logos on the sides. I'm really happy with how it came out. The performance is awesome, and has all of the accessories that I think not only look cool, but increase its effectiveness. And I am really pleased with how this came out. Hope you guys like it.
So for this build, I really wanted to give spray painting a try. So I took the lower receiver outside to prepare for painting. I started with initial primer coat to cover the lower. I had to make sure I got every single crevice and not miss any spots. After I let the primer coat cure for a bit, I was ready to paint it in my favorite color, pink. For the spray paint, I chose the Montana Black Punk Pink, as the quality of the paint holds up well and gives me the exact shade of pink that I was looking for. After a quick shake of the can, I started going at it. Again, I had to make sure that I coated the entire receiver. After letting the first coat dry for a while, I went ahead and applied the second coat of paint. After I let the second coat dry, I was very happy with how the color came out in the end. So now on to the actual assembly. All of the parts I will assemble on the gun are shown on the table here. And as you can tell, the pink magazine matches very well with the pink receiver that I just painted. Okay, let's get started. I started with installing the Noveske hand stop. Since this is a Noveske build, I'd figure matching it with the Noveske hand stop. It would be perfect. Second, I installed the Regular Defense modular MHS hand stop. This allows me to get a comfortable hold on the rifle when I'm aiming downrange. Next is the optic. I chose the EOTech because I like the aesthetic of the boxy design. I also wanted to swap out the factory stock with the BCM stock, and I added the Regular Defense Fear buttstock, which is a cheek riser and it's very comfortable to use. To increase comfort and ergonomics, I also added the goon tape to the grip of my rifle. This just allows me to get more positive grip on the gun and to be able to hold it better. After that, I installed this Bravo Element mini light on an Arasaka with a Mod Light mod button. Next up was the maul. As you can see, I was barely able to fit it next to the tactical flashlight, but thankfully I was able to make it work. I positioned my thumb switch to where it was most comfortable and secured it down. And after a little wire management, this part was complete. To add to the aesthetics, I've installed the smoke suppressor and flash hider combo. I like it because it gives the rifle more an aggressive look. And of course, to finish off the build, I chose this pink magazine, and all done. Alrighty, so this is my build. You're gonna see a few similarities in most of my gun builds. So for this one, I wanted to add a pop of color, and for the lower, I spray painted for the first time in the color pink. Pink is my favorite color, so I just wanted to add a little pop of that with the Lancer magazine. I think it came out pretty good. I was a little nervous, but I think it came out nice. I already played with this, and I think it's really neat to just have this and this pop of color. I added a few more things that I normally don't add, like the cheek riser on the stock, and I'm just going based off what's more comfortable to me when I use this gun. But overall, I really like my build.
If it wasn't obvious, all of us here love Airsoft, and we love building Airsoft guns together and coming up with different unique ways to do things. We'd love to continue doing build logs like this, where we take a really popular or interesting AEG or gas blowback rifle and kind of come up with 3 or 4 different ways to do it. We'd love to hear from you guys in the comments section. What would you guys like us to build next? What would you guys like to see 3 or 4 different ways? Let us know. We'll see you next time.